Hi folks, welcome back to the workbench. Today is going to be part one of a video series talking about gun screws and screwdrivers for gun screws, screwdrivers for gunsmithing, and some of the concerns that are relevant to that. I had a comment on one of my prior videos on the Colt Python where someone was saying that the first way you can tell that you're doing gun disassembly wrong is using a Craftsman screwdriver, a hardware store typical screwdriver. And they're exactly right. Let's talk about why that is and how we get around that and how to make a screwdriver that fits correctly from a Craftsman screwdriver. Because once we're done with it, it is no longer going to be a typical Craftsman. So the specific issue that we have with a typical screw and a typical screwdriver is that on a gun screw, you're going to have these parallel sides here coming down into the slot. Whereas the screwdriver is going to be this wedge shape. It's not parallel like the gun screw is. Most of the time what ends up happening is the bottom of it here, where it's going to maybe bottom out in the slot, is too narrow, and the top is too wide. So you get the worst of both worlds. If you don't put it down in all the way, you're not going to get full engagement down here deep in the screw where it's the strongest. Instead, you're going to be just engaging up here at the top. What that's going to do is just rip out the metal here. I actually have a couple screws from an old Buffington side off of a trapdoor Springfield, an 1889 model, I think, where you can see that someone at some point in this screw's life messed it up. Both of them. They're just all marred up. They've stripped out. Just terrible. 130-year-old screws damaged by improperly fitted screwdrivers. If you actually get down into here where you're trying to get full engagement, what will happen is that the screwdriver will wedge against the top edges of the screw here, and you end up deforming this metal just on insertion of the screwdriver before you've even tried to turn it, just forcing it in to where it actually gets to bottom out in here. You'll wedge this metal out. You'll end up with an ugly screw. So what we have is two problems with a typical screwdriver, because we need it to be oversized to start with so that we can make it fit this box perfectly. So what we need to do is we need to remove material to take the width down, and we need to remove material to take the width down also. It's too wide in both directions. So we'll first start, when we do this, by removing some material off the side, is the way I prefer to do it. You could do this in the reverse order, but it's just not my preference. We'll remove some material off the side, and then we'll flatten it out to where we end up with a screwdriver that is the proper width for the screw. It's not too wide, it's not too narrow. We're getting good engagement across the whole area of the screw, and it is narrow enough to where it is getting down in all the way in the screw and getting good engagement on all the strongest parts of the screw and not causing any deformation, not causing any marring. To do this, we are going to be using that Craftsman screwdriver. And for this, I'm going to be fitting it to the Colt Python, because the screwdriver I'm using is actually a little bit narrow for this crane screw. I'd rather have one that fits it perfectly. It's working fine. The screw hasn't been marred in any way. You can see that it's still perfect, but we're going to want to have a better screwdriver for that, just for the sake of having it really and making this video. So let's start out by determining what dimensions we're going to need. If I take my dial calipers, I'm just going to come in here and come just inside of the outside edges of the screw. Exactly how much isn't really critical, but you don't want to be running up against the frame when you're trying to turn the screw. I get about a 0.2, about 208 is really what I'm at, but we'll call it a 210. We can always narrow it down a little bit if we need to. And then I'm going to use just this feeler gauge to figure out the other dimension. This is a 0.32. Let's see if that, or 0.032, I'm sorry, 0.032. No, not quite. It starts a little bit, but it's not really getting in there. So let's go to a 0.30. And that is right about perfect. It might be slightly narrow, but it's not by much. So 0.30 and 0.210. So let's make sure that we're going to be able to use the screwdriver for that. Ooh, slipped off. Width at the end is more than 0.40, so we've got plenty of material in the width. Need to take about 5 thousandths off of each side. .280. Plenty, more than enough. So we need to take about, I say, 80. So about 35 thousandths off of either side of this. We're just going to be taking material off the sides here using just a file to start out with. So come on in for the next video where I'm going to move this over to the vise and we will remove that material from the sides. Thanks for watching, and check out the next one.